Sorry about this. Okay. Hello, everyone. It looks like people are trickling in. Lovely to see folks, or at least your names. I'm just going to give people 1 minute for Zoom to let everyone in, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for being here. I love everyone's backgrounds. They feel very calming.
Mindfulness.
We love it. We love it. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. This is the URL Media session, Let's Talk Careers, the What's Next webinar. This webinar will be recorded and likely posted online so that the folks who couldn't make it can access the wisdom of our brilliant panelists. We do want to have off the record sessions in small groups around this topic in the future. So stay tuned for info on those. Tell us if there's topics you really want us to cover. But we are just really grateful that you took time out of your day and your week to spend with us. Um, and especially if you're one of the folks who came because you had just faced a layoff, I want to give props to you for taking this time for yourself to think about what's next for you. There is closed captioning available. And if you need any other accommodation that's currently unavailable, drop it in the chat to me directly. The goal of this webinar is to offer guidance, resources, and framing for folks who have been laid off. We do center all of our work in BIPOC and underrepresented communities. So everyone is absolutely welcome here, but know that that is the framing with which we approach the conversation. Please drop any questions you have in the Q&A chat. In the Q&A function, you can do so anonymously or not anonymously, and I think people can upvote questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists. We have Leonor Ayala Polley, who is URL Media's Chief of Business Development and Partnerships, and a wonderful boss, if I say so myself. Um, she leads URL's inclusive talent development arm and is a longtime journalist who joined URL from NBC News, where she led the network's diversity and inclusion programs while co-producing award-winning programs. She co-founded NBCU Academy, the NBCU News Group's flagship training program for college students and young professionals, and she most recently served as the creator and executive editor of NBCUacademy.com, which is an open access journalism and media training website. We have Joanne Griffith, who is the Chief Content Officer for APM Studios, the podcast production division of American Public Media, where she has creative oversight of original and acquired podcasts. She is also the founder of Entitled Leaders, a conversation and coaching space for leaders of color in media. She was the founding managing editor of the California Newsroom, an NPR regional news hub, and was lead producer for the ESPN 30 for 30 podcast, The King of Crenshaw. She's also led teams at Marketplace, Southern California Public Radio, and BBC. Phoebe Gavin, who, if you've been to our sessions before, you may recognize. She's a career and leadership coach and the founder of Better with Phoebe, where she works with clients to build radical clarity, design custom career growth plans, and leverage effective and sustainable tactics so they can navigate the fast paced and ever changing labor market without burning out or losing their soul. We love it. She's previously served as the executive editor of talent and development at Vox and as editorial director of Quartz. And last, I'm Sonali Kohli. I'm moderating today. I'm a senior recruiter at URL. I spent a decade in journalism, mostly at the Los Angeles Times, covering education and breaking news. And I took a buyout in 2021, spent a year freelancing as an editor, recruiter, and book author before joining URL full time in 2022. My young adult nonfiction book, Don't Wait, publishes June 4th, so pre-order it. So thank you. So questions for all the panelists to start. You've been laid off. How do you find a job? Or a way to get the income you need, right? Because that doesn't necessarily look the way we think of a job. How do you find a job or a way to get income you need after a layoff? What is your just number one biggest piece of advice people should leave with today? Lenore, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say lean into your network. That is my number one piece of advice. All too often, and I've been guilty of this because I just didn't have really great role models when I started my career, in terms of using a network or understanding what that really meant or how to do it effectively. So I had to learn through lots of bumps in the road and reaching out to people and letting them know where you are is absolutely okay. And I had trouble with that, like breaking through that sort of mental barrier of feeling shame or embarrassed that I was in this situation. I found that once I got through that, people were in my network were actually really, really happy to help me. So understanding that it's okay to ask for help. So I would say use your network and remember it's okay to ask for help. And one of the things that Mitra, my childhood friend, taught me is that you always offer to help too, right? So that was something that I learned much later in life. I always did it sort of organically, but being more intentional about saying, well, how can I help you? Is there something I can help you with? Is just always nice to ask, even if the answer is like, no, not right now. But just, that reciprocity is always, I think, welcome.
I love that. Joanne?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for the invite. This is such a necessary, sadly necessary conversation. So thanks for putting this together. Plus one to everything that Leonor said. I would also add though, take a beat. It is one of the hardest things that you will ever go through, being laid off. And so make sure that you're extending kindness to yourself before you kind of hit the streets trying to find another job. Like, economics, what they are, like we live in the real world, like bills are due, rent has to be paid, all of those things. But even if it's just a couple of days just to acknowledge the hurt of what you have just gone through, then once you get through that, spending some time really thinking about what it is that you want to do. So reaching out to your network, having a sense of what's out there, what's available. But it's okay to also take a moment to think about, all right, what is it that I actually would like to do? And really kind of focus your energy on that too. It may actually be, sometimes a layoff can be, it doesn't feel like it in the moment, but sometimes it can be a gift to reset and reframe. Just because you've always been a journalist doesn't mean to say you have to stay a journalist, or just because you've always edited audio doesn't, like, you don't have to stay. It may also be an opportunity to think about how you pivot. So I think those are the two things that I would suggest, and take a look at your resume as well. Is it reflective of you? Have somebody else read over it for you as well, because I don't know about you all, but I know very often I am the worst at really selling myself and what I've done. So in the spirit of what Lenore said, kind of get some help, have someone look over your resume for you, to edit, but also to kind of be like, hey, actually you did this thing or this thing or this thing, because sometimes it can be hard to do that for yourself.
Thank you. And I will use this time to say I will read over any of your resumes. Email me. Phoebe, what is your biggest piece of advice?
Well, I want to encourage everyone to take advantage of Sonali's offer, because it's not just have someone look at your resume, but if you have access to someone with hiring experience to look at your resume, that's better than a random friend or a family member who may not have that experience. They may be able to look at it and find, typos or something, but they're not going to be able to occupy the mindset of someone who is evaluating a candidate if they don't actually have experience doing that. And so to the extent that you're able, and all of you here are able to reach out to someone who is willing to offer that service to you and also has that hiring experience, make sure you do that. But underlining all of the things that Lenore and Joanne have said, I also want to put on just like a very practical thing of like, figure out whether you are eligible for unemployment in your local jurisdiction. If you are entitled to severance. That may mean that you're not entitled to unemployment. Depends on the jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction is different. So go to your state's website, go to your county website. If you are living in a larger city, there may be a city level program as well. Figure out what government programs are available for you, because someone, whether it was you or your employer, was paying into that program so that unemployed people would be able to have access to some sort of income. Depending on the jurisdiction, again, what kind of programs are available, there may also be some services available to you for it that are for outplacement or job support, or those sorts of things may also be available to you. So take advantage of them. There's no shame in doing so. They exist for these situations. And so do a Google, figure out what's available, and use what is available to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Joanne, kind of piggybacking off of that, Joanne, can you talk to us a little bit about what to do when you're notified of a layoff in terms of kind of handling your finances? What do you, particularly if they've given you a time frame before your last day, right? What can you ask for? What do you look for in your severance package? Can you negotiate it? Give us some guidance on that.
Yeah, so when you get that notification from HR, make sure that you are in a space to be able to sit and really digest what is being told to you. Make sure that you're getting those materials in writing so that you can digest in your own time. Most places will not expect you to sign a severance package like day of. You will usually have, even if it's 24 hours, to look over everything to make sure that you are happy with signing it. Some places will have things like a non-disparagement kind of document. Like, there's all of these things, so just make sure that you give yourself time to read through everything and be really clear on what you are being offered. It has to be clear for you, so some places might give you a week for every year that you've been there, 2 weeks for every week that you've been there, for every year that you've been there. It may be some other kind of buyout situation, but just read it and make sure that you understand it. If you don't understand it, continue to ask questions until you do. In addition to, and I think Phoebe had kind of alluded to this too, like, ask for what other things may be available to you. So as you said, kind of outplacement services. Ask if there is any extensions that you can get on healthcare, for example. Some places, if your end date is, say, the first of the month, for example, you may actually get another month of healthcare just by kind of changing your date just slightly. So be clear on whether you're able to do that before you then start looking at COBRA or any other ways to kind of have health insurance coverage. And then some places, your severance can be negotiable. They may say, the actual package itself isn't, but it may be, was there a big project that you were working on just before you ended? Is there some other way that the company is financially benefiting from the work that you have done? There can be additional bonuses that you may be able to get on top of your severance package. And also, finally, make sure that you check and see if you are eligible to get any vacation that you have not taken. Should be, and it's not everywhere, but double check and see if you actually get to keep those days and be cashed out for those days. Some places will do sick leave as well. Many places, in my experience, don't. But your PTO days, any that you haven't used, you should be able to cash those out. So those are the kind of things that I would start with. Also, as well, check if there is any kind of employee assistance program that may help with kind of mental health services or anything like that. So just really think about what it is that you will need, both professionally, personally, how you're going to feed yourself and those kind of things, and ask for everything. The worst that can happen is that they can say no, but if you don't raise it or don't flag it, then a lot of places will be like, this is the package, sign it. I think something else that's important to say is that if you for any reason feel like, hang on a second, my being laid off is not fair or just, or you feel like your layoff is being used in a way to kind of shuffle you out, that isn't just about a reduction in force, you don't actually have to sign your severance package. Now, what it means is that you won't get the money, but it does leave the pathway open if you want to look at some other legal recourse. That is a pathway to be considered seriously, because that's something that can kind of stretch out over many months and many years. But if you have any questions about that, you should, don't feel that you have to sign what's in front of you, if you have questions or concerns about the reasons why you're being laid off.
And just really quickly too, Joanne mentioned using an employee assistance program if one is available. Many employee assistance programs or EAPs also include some sort of legal services. And so that could be an option. What the turnaround is going to look like in that situation, we don't know. But if you have access to some sort of legal services at a discounted or at a free cost because of your access to an employee assistance program, use that to better understand your service severance agreement or any other agreements that you are being expected to sign. It can be a really great way to get better understanding of that as quickly as possible without having to spend as much money, because lawyers are expensive.
Yeah, they are. That's great. Thank you. I would also add, do the math, because you can't trust that the company has done the math right. So make sure you do the math. If there's a formula they're using, like, do it yourself and make sure that it aligns. So Phoebe, kind of, we've like negotiated our severance. We're good. The period after a layoff can be very overwhelming for people, with a lot of, especially if it's a high profile layoff situation, like some of the ones we've seen recently. There's offers of support flooding in, you're trying to process. How do you manage that influx in order to further your career and also give yourself time? And then how do you leverage your network in the way that Leonor talked about to get what you need for yourself in that moment and in the future?
So the first thing is I want to validate the idea that it is overwhelming to receive so many generous offers of support. And if you feel like something's wrong with you because you're not just grateful to all of these people, there's nothing wrong with you. It's genuinely very overwhelming to receive. And so my recommendation is to give yourself permission to tell them, thank you, can I get back to you? And that can be as simple as, thank you so much for the offer. It's still very fresh and I'm not sure what help would be most useful in this moment. Is it all right if I circle back with you in 2 weeks? And then once you get that acknowledgement, then you have full consent and everyone is mutually informed that in 2 weeks you're going to send them a note. And that note doesn't have to have a specific list of things that you are requesting. It could just be, thank you again for your offer. I need a little bit more time to process. I'm still not quite sure what I'd like to do. Is it okay if I reach out to you in another 2 weeks? Give yourself the space to triage for yourself where you feel like the help is going to be most helpful, and to space it out so that you have the energy to show up to those conversations in a way that's going to be productive for you. And the folks who are reaching out are choosing of their own volition to offer their time, their resources, their connections, their energy, and accept that from them. They want to be helpful, and you accepting that help from them at a time that makes sense for you, or you have the energy for it and you feel like you know where to direct it, you're doing something for them too. We are communal creatures, humans like helping. And so just by giving them the opportunity to support you, you're doing something for them too. And so don't feel like you have to, that you're, putting a bunch of debts on the other side of the column because you're accepting help from folks. And then the last tip that I will encourage you to do is to create some sort of system for yourself where you can keep track of all of these folks. It could be an email draft or even something as complicated as a task management app. I use a task management app for my entire life. And when I got laid off and I had an influx of offers of support for someone, I used my task management app to keep track of all of these folks. Take the pressure off of your brain, which is already going in overdrive because of how intense the emotions are around this. Outsource that tracking process to something that works for you, whether it's a journal, a spreadsheet, a Google Doc, an email draft, a task management app. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters that it works for you and that it takes pressure off of your brain.
Amazing. Thank you. I want to transition now into talking about, we're ready to look for a new job. We're interviewing, we're figuring out what's next. Like, how do we do it? So, let's say we've applied for something with the interview process. Leonor, I have a two-parter for you. First, what do you see as what are the challenges that you see for people, going into job interviews after a layoff?
So want to underscore things that Joanne and Phoebe have said to answer this question. As someone who works with a lot of talent and does a lot of initial screening, I want to just reiterate to everyone, take that beat, take a pause. Here's why it's important. If you don't, you're showing up in these spaces, and as you start interviewing again or talking to folks, even if you're just networking, that can show up in ways that are not going to serve you and your goals. So you just want to make sure that you're, to Joanne's point, it doesn't need to be a lengthy period of time, but just making sure that you have that opportunity to reset and triage and do what you need to do for yourself, as Phoebe said, because it will show up in those conversations, and the person on the receiving end may take away, you're not ready, this person's not ready to move forward. They're still holding on to a lot of feelings about their last layoff or their last role. And it's okay to have those feelings. I've just seen that in certain conversations I've had, that shows up. And for me, it's for when candidates are talking to me, it's quite okay. And I will coach them on how to present during an interview. There are just ways to talk about those experiences and layoffs, which I know we're going to get into in a little bit, that are just more will serve your goals at the end of the day. So, I hope that makes sense. I do think it's important before you hit the ground running and going and seeking opportunities that you have your career narrative solid. You've thought about, this experience has brought you here, and you're connecting all the dots and telling a story, the beginning, middle, end, in a way that's moving your story forward. And as journalists, we understand that, right? So that's how you should really think about your career narrative and your story. Phoebe, I think you wanted to jump in here with something.
Oh, I just put in the chat that something can
okay.
be true and unhelpful at the same time. You can
Yeah.
have your big feelings, and your
Yes.
big feelings can be true and valid, and also not necessarily serve you in a particular networking or interview conversation.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what friends and family and therapists and support groups are for. And like definitely find those spaces. This is all great. Let's get into
Before I just have one more thing, if I could. One more thing that I would recommend you avoiding spending too much time on in interviews and informational interviews, networking conversations, even if you're asked about it, is like spilling tea. And the big reason is not because like talking about what's happening in the industry is bad, or because having that moment of catharsis is bad, but because those conversations are business meetings. Like, you are trying to spend that time conveying to the person on the other side of that conversation how great you are, and like how terrible your boss was, and how you can't believe what's happening in the industry, and I can't, this is my third layoff. Like, all of that sort of gossipy stuff it doesn't do the job of helping them understand how great you are. It might be entertaining, it might be cathartic, it might be enjoyable for both of you to just sort of talk about it a little bit, but it doesn't help you get the job. And so stay in business mode when you're in those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Joanne, anything to add about the challenges that you see from folks in interviews?
No, Phoebe really hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I was going to say. Just kind of show up as your best self, save all the other stuff for the group chat, for friends, for family. And the thing is, like, if you're applying for another job in media, everyone is very aware of what is happening. But your job now is actually kind of selling yourself and being like, I am great and you need me on your team. And everything else kind of, really should kind of be a little bit of a backseat in that moment where you are having a conversation. So yeah, 1,000% agree with everything that Phoebe said.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. If you find yourself in a headspace right before you're having one of these conversations where you're not feeling like your best self, I would say it's better to almost postpone or reschedule. Because I have had conversations with folks that feel like, oh, I have this set time. And even as the first, in a vetting process, I still am taking away things about where you are in that conversation. And, I'm determining whether you're moving to the next step or not. So even as the first line of defense, if you will, you always want to present your best. So I would say take that beat too. And it's okay to reschedule if you're not feeling up to the conversation or that you're going to give your best at that point. So just make sure you know where you are right before those conversations. It's really important.
Yeah, I always tell people like do something nice for yourself before, so you're kind of in a little bit of a good headspace, at least for the next, hour. So let's get into the interview itself. Leonor, you talk a lot about crafting a career narrative and kind of your like 90-second interview pitch. How do you do that? How long should it be? How do you put your experience into such a short amount of time? What is the goal of it?
So I will say I'm constantly working on this. So I see it as an evolving process, right? You practice it a lot. I would say lean on your friends in the business that are willing to help you. This is where you start, calling on people and saying, hey, here's how I'm talking about my experience. How does this resonate with you? What can I edit? What can I change? It's always helpful to record yourself as you're trying to package your 90-second sell. But in big picture, thinking about your career narrative, it's really important to think about where you've been and why and where you're going and having some clarity around that. And it's not to say that there can't be any question marks for you about where you're going. But in those moments where you're asking someone for help, let's say it's that networking conversation, you want to make sure that you know what you're asking them for. Showing up and saying, well, I don't know, you tell me, what do you have? That's just not helpful or productive for you or for the person that's offered to help you. And I have been in conversations like that many times, and I've been guilty of being that person really early on in my career, just showing up and saying, I don't really know what I want to get out of this conversation. So make sure you do your homework on that person and how they can possibly help you. So in building your career narrative, you want to think about that beginning, middle, and where you are now, because it's not the end, right? But you want to think about where you are present day and where you'd like to land, what kinds of opportunities. Think about your transferable skills. And it's always helpful, I find, to talk to someone else in the business. And another thing you and I, Sonali, that we talk about is looking at LinkedIn for that job that you think you want, and looking at the job descriptions and finding like key words and terms and sort of overlaying that with your resume will help you develop that story. I did a lot of these chats with my good friend Richard Louie, and a lot of his advice is that preparation is key. And that could, even though you think you know your story, preparing and kind of rehearsing a little bit of that story, either on video to yourself or in a recording, is always helpful. Playing it back to yourself. So, I just did this with my sister too. She was like looking for a long time, and she just landed a job. But we did a lot of preparation. I also did mock interviews with her. So if there's someone that in your network that can really help push you to really make your story concise, that's, I would lean on those folks too. So I don't know
Awesome.
if you and Joanne have anything to add to that.
I was gonna say, Phoebe or Joanne, do you have anything to add about kind of going into an interview? Any big picture advice?
I think just building on what Lenore said is examples, 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 examples. People will often use buzzwords like strategy and innovation, and there's nothing wrong with those words in and of themselves. But give me an example, like what did you do? How were you involved in a particular thing? What was the end result? Some place might be looking at what was the value that you added beyond being brilliant and being there? How did you maybe move a financial goal forward? How did you bring a strategic vision to life? What is the role that you very uniquely played within that? And be very comfortable, because sometimes it can kind of feel like you're bragging on yourself. This is the time to brag on yourself, so have those examples and be really solid in them, and like say them with your full chest. Don't be like, yeah, so I brought in like a 200% increase. Like, say it, like really be like, yeah, I brought in an increase of like I did that, me, not everybody else, me. So get really comfortable with that. And then I think kind of building on what Leonor was saying about understanding the person that you're talking to, do your homework on that business and on that company. What have they said about their mission strategically? What have you kind of seen them build out in the last kind of a year or two? What may some of the challenges that they have talked about, maybe have talked about publicly, but kind of go in prepared and ready. Because when you're going in and you're like, the company, their challenges, their strengths, and all the rest of it, you're kind of just starting at a different place, because then you're forming your narrative around, this is the company, their mission and vision. This is actually what I have done, and this is how I fit into this. So then you're already doing that work of saying, this is how I will fit in with what you do, from a place of strength and examples, as opposed to, well, I kind of do this and I kind of do that. Like, now is the time for confidence.
I love it. Phoebe, anything to add?
Two quick things. If you are like me and had your parents or someone else in your family or culture of origin tell you the work should speak for itself, I want you to ditch that. I want you to eject that phrase out of your brain and into the sun, because it will hold you back. Your work does not have a mouth. It cannot speak for you. You need to use your mouth to speak for yourself. They're not going to just know based on what's on your resume, or just know based on what's on your cover letter, or just know because you mentioned in passing that you did a thing, that it is valuable to them or their organization. You have to paint a vivid picture about how those contributions, that experience, those achievements can make a difference in their organization. Now, you're not going to have examples and, big, marquee things to point to for every single situation. There may be some situations where you don't have any experience at all. And in those situations, I encourage you to lean on hypotheticals and to talk about, in this situation, I haven't had the privilege of jumping into a challenge like that in the past, but if I were to face it in this role, this is the way that I would approach it, and be able to answer that question in a way that demonstrates your thought process. Because there's no job where there's no candidate who's going to walk in and check every single box on every single job description, their wish lists, their hopes for, and there are always going to be people who are missing this thing or the other thing. And if you get a question where it's about the gap that you have, talk about the way that you would close that gap or the way that you would approach that challenge, versus getting frozen up or feeling like, you're not good enough for the role. And that's even going back to before you even apply. If you see those gaps, don't think about the hypothetical. If you can come up with a way that you would approach it in the role, then apply for the job.
Can I just add to that, Sonali? Phoebe, you just hit something that has become my pet peeve recently. I love a can-do attitude when people are like, I'll figure it out, but that's not an answer. So really kind of, you can say that through saying, here's how I would figure it out. So the thought process is really important, and try to stay away from just saying, I have such a great attitude, I can figure anything out. Yes, and so you want to make sure that you follow that up.
Yeah, be specific. I would look for these resources. I would talk to these people. I would do this research. I would ask these questions. Be specific about how you would go about figuring it out.
Yeah, and that's where the homework Joanne was talking about comes in, making sure that you've done all that research prior. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also somebody had mentioned in the chat that you all could not hear me as well. I have adjusted some sound things, so let me know if that's still an issue. And then we're hoping to get to audience questions in about 10 minutes, so continue to drop them and we'll try to answer as many as we can. I would also add, I think the specificity is important. What we see a lot, Leonor and I, that we talk about is people get kind of nervous and then you start to ramble, and rambling undermines your story and your effectiveness. It's like an anecdotal lead. You want to keep it tight. So there are interview methods. If it's helpful, there are interview methods that you can look at. You don't have to stick exactly to them, but for example, like the STAR method, right? It's situation, task, action, result. pre-write a couple of those stories for yourself, have them in front of you in the interview so that you can refer to them and like get yourself back on track if you're starting to get nervous and ramble. I now want to get into a little bit of people wanting to shift their careers in different ways. We've gotten quite a few questions before this session about that Phoebe, I'd like you to address about if you're in journalism, which I think most of the folks are in here, or even in another field, but you're realizing that you want to switch fields. What is your advice to go about that? And what are some of the jobs that journalists can look for that we don't think of? I think there's a lot of people who think it's journalism or PR and there's nothing else. So tell us about some other options.
Yeah, so it's totally okay for you to decide that the journalism chapter of your career has ended. It is totally okay. And so if you feel like you're in that place, there are sort of three very obvious, well-trodden paths that journalists use to transition into a new career. The first, that we all know, is PR and comms. Another one is marketing within the medium that you have experience with. And the other one is sort of data and research roles. And those can be in nonprofit environment, for-profit environment, academic environment, but data and research are fields that are very attractive and transferable for reporters and other types of journalists who spend a bunch of time learning about something so that they can distill it into what the general public or their particular audience needs to know. And so those are the three most obvious. But if none of those three feel particularly appealing to you, first, I encourage you to not go off of your assumptions about what those roles or those sorts of industries are. Journalists as a career coach, I work with a lot of journalists who come in with a lot of preconceived notions about what those jobs are. And I don't hate it. I think it's that I would encourage you to do some research first. And if you do the research and it still feels bad, then honor that. But if these don't feel right for you, then I encourage you to spend some time in the blue sky, get romantic, be unreasonable about what you'd like to spend your time doing, and then go a layer deeper. If your dream job would be traveling around the world, what does travel mean? Is that novelty? Is that learning new things? Is that being exposed to new people? Is that moving around a lot? Like, what does that actually mean? And often those one level down concepts can turn into criteria that you can use to evaluate the kinds of opportunities that are out there. I think the industry can be very insular, and you can forget that there's an entire rest of the economy out there, even though many of us cover it. And there are lots and lots and lots of opportunities out there. And if you know what the criteria are for you, for what you want to experience out of work and how you want work to sit in your life, you can use those concepts as criteria that will help you evaluate other options. And I encourage you not to do this in your head, or at least not to do it exclusively in your head. Talk to people, write things down. The more you have feedback from other folks, especially folks who have diverse work experiences outside of the industry, and the more you do it on paper, the more clear you will get versus going in circles.
That's great. Go ahead, Joanne, anything to add?
Yeah, no, just to add to that, one of the words that Phoebe said is experience. And someone said that to me very recently, was kind of just really thinking about what is the experience that you want to have at work. Sometimes it can be, we'll get kind of caught up in, oh, well, my job title needs to be X, but it's really like, what is the experience that you may want to have at work? The other thing too, like, don't be shy about using AI, kind of putting in some kind of keywords of real things that you have either enjoyed in your job or you're particularly good at, things that have really surfaced for you in your career, putting those in and kind of seeing what job titles may come back. Some of it you may be like, no, that's not it. But there may just be some things in there that might surprise you, that might just, as Phoebe said, just kind of helping you get to that next layer of let me explore this. And then put your journalism hat on, do your reporting, talk with people, do your research, go and see if you can spend a day with someone doing something. The internet is vast. Look at things like Masterclass, for example, there's free trials and all the rest of it all the time, but really try and immerse yourself in what is out there in this world beyond journalism. It feels like a scary place, right? Because we're all like storytellers at heart, but there are a lot of different ways that you can approach it. But, use AI, talk with people, do your reporting would be the things. Think about the experience that you want.
That's amazing.
If you don't already, for our journalists in the audience, join the LinkedIn for Journalists group and attend their next webinar on LinkedIn for Journalists. When you go through that webinar, they give you a free year of LinkedIn Premium, and that gives you access to LinkedIn Learning. And LinkedIn Learning is a massive e-learning repository. So if you're familiar with Skillshare, it's the same thing. And you would get access to that for free just by virtue of having that free year of LinkedIn Premium. If the timing doesn't work, or if you're not a journalist, I strongly recommend even just getting a month of it, because it has a lot of really great benefits for LinkedIn as a platform, but it also, of course, gives you access to that e-learning platform where they cover a lot of different skills and across a lot of different industries, and can be a really great way for you to get a taste of as to whether something would be interesting to you or not.
That's great. Thank you. Leonor, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on what Joanne was saying about putting your reporter hat on if you're looking to pivot or exploring other roles outside of journalism. One thing that has been helpful for folks I've worked with and I've seen like actually, the results of using LinkedIn, yes, as if you can do that workshopping at the repository, that's a wonderful tool, but also looking at your LinkedIn and saying, who do I know? Looking at those connections and then asking your connections to, hey, you're connected to this person who's a marketing manager, and I really just want to understand marketing and make sure that like I have the transferable skills. And, I have found that when you reach out to people, they're happy to connect you to other people in their network, as long as you have an ask, right? And like, you're very clear about what your asks are. And that's the homework piece, making sure that you have very pointed questions and that you're going in with curiosity, is very fruitful, and just sort of ruling out like, okay, not marketing, maybe comms. And here, you keep asking folks, and you'd be surprised at how many folks are willing to open their network up to you. And it's those like other connections that might actually land you a job.
That's great. Thank you. And Phoebe added in the chat, always ask, is there anyone else you think I should speak to? Very journalist, very good advice. Anything I didn't ask, anything else, anyone else I should talk to? So this is all fantastic. I would also add, when you're looking for your next role, look in the in-betweens, right? Like, I didn't know that recruiting for journalism was an option, because as a woman of color, I had not like met with a recruiter. It's not like there's a specific population that gets that. It's not me. But I did, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. I love it. Right. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can write a book. You can also edit books. You can copy edit books. You can be a sensitivity reader for books. There's all of these different things that are really interesting. And if you make a list of the skills that you have, and then I had never thought of using AI to come up with job titles. Love that, Joanne. You can also search on LinkedIn for like jobs with those keywords in the job description, and like see what comes up there. Okay, so Phoebe, you were, sorry, I'm trying to get, I got caught up in the question of it. So Phoebe, if you've done like the investigation, right? If you've like figured out this is what I want to do, how do you convince the hiring manager of that new job that you could transition into it, even though like that job title hasn't been on your list before?
It again comes back to painting a really vivid picture of what it would look like with you in the organization. Recruiters and hiring managers are not hiring you, they are hiring the story you tell them about yourself. So make it a really good story. And so if you have a particular skill set and you know in your mind, oh man, if I went into this job, this is exactly how I would use my skill set. I would be so good at it. And yes, I would have these areas where I would need to do some research and ask some questions and practice and build my skills. But man, this skill set that I have would be so great. Tell the story of how it is such a huge advantage that you have a ton of writing experience, but specifically writing stories that grab people's attention and pull them through a narrative to where they want to engage with the characters. And that makes you the subjects of your story. And that makes you a really good copywriter, because it's not going to be boring marketing copy. It's going to be a story that customers want to read that's ultimately going to get them to buy the product. That is great. that is a vivid picture that the recruiter or the hiring manager would be able to imagine in their mind. Oh yeah, it would be so wonderful if our marketing copy wasn't so flat that it really felt like a story and people wanted to stick with it and read it. That would be great. We should hire this person, even though he, she, they doesn't have the marketing experience that we normally would think of for this role. This might be better. The vivid picture is the thing that makes you get over the hump with that.
Thank you. Joanne, I have a question for you. So a lot of people we've heard from are kind of, they got laid off as reporters, right? And now, but they want to move into leadership positions, into leadership roles. Many have potentially managed up, right, or managed across, but they have not held a title of a leadership role. So if someone's been laid off from a reporter position and editing is your goal, what's your advice to make that shift?
Be sure that you want to do that. You know, often when folks are like, I want to be in leadership, I want to be an editor, it can be, and there's nothing wrong with this, but it can be attached to really, I want to earn more money. And often earning more money is seen as I need to get a promotion and go into leadership to be able to do that. So have a really honest conversation with yourself about, is this about earning more money, which we're very pro that, or is it truly that you are interested in being a manager, a coach, and working with people to be their best selves and kind of tell the best stories? Because there is a difference. If you and if the thing is I want to earn more money, then that's a whole other conversation, and we should have conversations about how you can pursue that. If it is that you do want to transfer into editing and into management, really kind of go back and look at your work, because people don't decide that they want to be in leadership overnight. And if you're someone who has a heart for leadership and a heart for management, there will be things that you will have done in your work just as a consequence of who you are. So for example, are you always the one who has been working with the interns or the fellowships, folks who are coming through the door? Are you the person who is like low-key figuring out an onboarding plan for them because nobody else has actually done that? Have you sat and taken an interest in their work and maybe said, oh, hey, here's how you can shape this story? Have you let people shadow you? All of those things are actually leadership. They just don't have the official title that's attached to them. So really kind of go back and look at your career and how you have shown up for others, and you will probably find that there's a lot of leadership experience in there. The other thing too, and Sonali, you kind of said it about kind of like the in-between. If you want to be an editor, go and edit. You know, it could be everything from resumes, it could be people's stories, it could be volunteering for programs. And there's this amazing program called Next Gen for people who want to get into audio and public media. You know, find those opportunities to be able to kind of build that bank of experience. You will really recognize if it's something that you really want to do, especially kind of going from reporting to editing. You know, it's you take more of a back seat. You know, it's not your byline on there. It's never reported by and edited by. It's kind of like, it's just the reporter's name. So kind of just really getting an understanding of like, am I okay with that before you really decide to pursue it? And there are just so many ways that you can do that. But just be honest with yourself about it. If you want more money, we can help you do that.
I absolutely have to underline Joanne's point about there being, if you have the heart for leadership, you will find ways to lead in any role that you're in. And so I'd encourage you to broaden your vocabulary around leadership. Like, we think of leadership as being in charge of something, but leadership can often be coaching, where you're teaching someone how to do something or helping them through a challenge. And that's something that you can do with your peers. That's something that you can do with interns. That's something that you can do with folks across the newsroom if you have skills to convey. And so if you have coaching experience, that works. That's leadership. If you have project management experience, that's leadership. If you have mentorship experience, that's leadership. And so those are all opportunities for you to, again, paint that vivid picture that you are ready for leadership, and that moving into a leadership role would be a good fit for you. Another really important thing is to do your research. It's like, read a book. There are so many leadership books out there that really help you understand the good and the bad and the ugly about leadership, and what kinds of leadership approaches help you get the best, not necessarily the most, but the best out of your team. And if you pair that knowledge, that sort of self-education about leadership, with the leadership coaching, mentoring, and project management experience you've had in your career so far, that paints a really vivid picture.
Plus one to what Joanne and Phoebe say about leadership, absolutely. I would also say if you are working at a nonprofit or you're doing some volunteer work, just thinking about how to position that as leadership too, because it is hard for people in, employers to stretch and think like, well, you haven't had that title and you haven't managed teams before. How is this going to work? And it's harder mentally to overcome that for someone like an employer, even if you're painting that vivid picture. So paint the vivid picture of what you would do, how you would do it, all the mentorship that you've done at work. But if you can point to also something in your personal life, like volunteer work you've done, where you've led teams or you've led the charge on like a hygiene drive or some other place where you've been able to rally a bunch of disparate groups to the same cause, like that's another way to paint a vivid picture of your leadership. And that kind of pushes the envelope for the employer to think a little bit, this person can not just in the workplace rally people, but they're also inspiring people outside of the workplace. I think that's, an okay line to draw when you're talking about your leadership experiences too. So I want to give you the permission to think outside of work.
I love that. Thank you. I have one last question from me before we get into audience questions. A lot of people, sometimes by choice, some forced into it by layoffs, are now finding themselves to be freelancers. So I'd love to end before we get to the audience questions with just from each of you one big piece of advice to navigate freelancing that nobody tells you. Mine is don't do anything without a contract. You should have a contract. You should read it. You should have like a sample contract that has the things, and it should say the date by which they have to pay you, and a penalty if they exceed that. That is my advice. Leonor, let's start with you. What's yours?
I don't know if no one tells you this. I think we talk about this a lot, but worth just reiterating. It's feast or famine, right? So just know that it will ebb and flow. And you need to pound the pavement sometimes and it gets exhausting. So, take a break when you need it. But just, it will be that for some time until you just really start gaining momentum. So just give yourself the time to get there.
Anna, I answered your question in the Q&A. So if you pop over to the answered question, it's there. To answer this question, I encourage you to not think of yourself as a freelancer, but to think of yourself as a small business. You are not just a person freelancing, you are a business. You need to think about yourself as a business and bring that professionalism to the way that you treat yourself as a boss and the way that you expect to be treated by the folks who are engaging your services as a business. And so I work with a lot of freelancers who are trying to make that adjustment. And when you get there, it gives you so much more confidence to to negotiate with the folks that you are engaging with, and also to think a little bit differently about your revenue streams. If the entirety of your revenue stream as a service provider, as a business providing content services, journalism services to organizations, if the only thing you're doing is big sprawling investigations, that is a very vulnerable business. But if you have diverse streams of income where you are bringing in freelance work that do lots of different things, it's more likely that your income is going to be a bit more stable. And also sometimes that stuff that's not as exciting can be a bit more lucrative and make more space for the things that are exciting and do really light your fire.
Only other thing that I'd add is that as a freelancer / small business, 100% agree with that. It's okay to say no to things, just like how in your newsrooms or, anywhere else that you've worked, there is kind of a mission and a vision statement. Because you are running your own business, make sure that you also have a mission and a vision statement for your business, aka you, and make sure that what you are working on and the companies that you work with and align with are in alignment with you. There is nothing worse than having to chase people for money. If it happens once, literally, like, do not work with them again, because they have shown you who they are and it's not going to change.
Fantastic. Very true. Okay, I want to hop into the questions. This is a really quick one. Who usually writes the contract? Is it you or the publication? How do you know what pricing to charge? I would say some places have a contract. And if they do, you want to read over it closely, and you can redline it, you can change things before signing it. And then if they ask you to do work and tell you how much, they'll pay you and say, okay, go off. Your due date is 2 weeks from now. Then you can send them a contract and say, I'd like us to sign this. Anything that any of you would add about how to know what pricing to charge?
How long is a piece of string? You know, I mean, part of that is research. You know, I think quite often a lot of us, maybe women, folks of color, other marginalized communities, will undercharge for things. So whatever number you come up with, just add like 20%, just to kind of get in the habit of being okay with negotiating what you are worth. Remember, you know, when you're freelancing and you're a small business, whatever fee you are charging, it's not just for the piece that you're doing. You also are having to cover your company overheads, your internet, your laptop, gas in your car if you're driving anywhere for a story, your health insurance, all of those things. So make sure, usually for salary and benefits, you're adding like an additional 30% for benefits. So just make sure in whatever you're charging that you are adding on, you know, you're going to have to save a little bit to pay Uncle Sam and all of those things. So like, don't make it so bare bones that you're not actually making any money, because everything's going to go to your overhead and everything else.
That's great. Thank you. One really good question. I've been on the job market for 6 months and got laid off at the end of 2023. I've had 5 interviews and no offers. My broad question is, how do we keep going and still remain hopeful? It really does feel like, how could I ever possibly be some organization's perfect fit? And I would add to that another question that was very similar, but also, you know, if you're having this exact experience and you're someone with 20 years of experience, you know, is ageism coming to play? How do you navigate that? So I would love for everyone to answer. I think that'll be the end of our time. I have marked down the rest of your questions, and please email me after, and I'm happy to talk through them with anyone.
I'm happy to talk through any of the remaining questions, Sonali. So if we have some left.
Yeah, let's talk about, if you've been on the job market for 6 months, you know, the situation I provided, how could I ever possibly be some organization's perfect fit? How do we keep going and remain hopeful? Let's all end on that. So Leonor, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can see how that's demoralizing, and it feels like, you know, you just want to take a break. We've talked about breaks a lot. I do think it is important to take a break. Think about perhaps asking for feedback from some of these folks if they're willing to give it to you. I know that some places won't share that or won't respond, and that's tough. You know, Sonali, you and I we have the privilege of asking for feedback and giving it to candidates, so we always give that back. But, you know, if you can reach out to someone who, you know, and you're certainly welcome to reach out to us. Sometimes coaching helps, and having someone listen to the career narrative or how you're pitching yourself, thinking more about how you've pitched yourself for these roles, and where you can shore up your story, could be a place to start. And, you know, I know this is very small comfort. A lot of people you know, go through this, and it's really hard to keep your head up, but just know that the right job and the right opportunity will present itself. You know, and you'll feel it and you'll know when it's there. I know that's small comfort, but also preparation goes a long way. So, you know, I would love to talk to you offline about that piece and how we can shore up your story. So certainly please use my email, reach out, and happy to talk through that with you.
Great. Just any last words, Phoebe and Joanne?
I just want to touch the ageism one really quickly. I get a lot of questions about ageism, and you can only control what you can control, and you can't control whether somebody else is racist, sexist, ageist, whatever. You can't control that. You can only control how you show up to your networking, how you show up with your application materials, how you interview. And if those things aren't working, then what is a different thing that you can try? And that could be, working with, an expert. That could be reaching out to agencies. That could be, there are a million other things that you might be able to try to adjust the way that you're approaching the things that are within your control. And I'm not going to say that you're not experiencing ageism, because you probably are. We are all experiencing isms. But that is not something that you can control. And so when you're focused on that as being the reason why things aren't working out, you are setting all of your power and putting it on the shelf. And I want you to hold on to your power and explore the areas where you can adjust the things that are within your control.
And I think just a tiny thing that I'll add, honestly, you never want to be somewhere that doesn't want you. Like this is always like, you still have power. The dynamic isn't always like, oh, the company, the company doesn't want me. It's kind of like, do you want the company? So kind of remember that too. If they don't want you, it's okay. Like, it hurts, got to acknowledge that, but dust yourself off and find the place that you want to be at, because it's not just about them wanting you.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you. We hope that we see you in our inboxes. And Phoebe, Joanne, and Leonor, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and sharing it. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, this was recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel in the coming week or so. All right. Farewell.